Hello, and thank you for joining us here at Autistic Radio. And thank you also to coldpack.co.uk for sponsoring Harry's Spectrum Voices The 555 show. If you use cryotherapy in your practice as a chiropractor, osteopath, or physio, using the Coldpack offering means that we here get a donation which keeps the lights on. And now for the main meat. Harry, are you ready to take away and stand up to the microphone?
Thanks, Jules. Hello, everyone. This is Harry's Facebook for Sunday, the 29th of March 2026. And this is where we go through the posts shared on autisticradio.com Facebook page. And what we do now is we start with a poem that was shared on the page. And the poem is called Autism, the Gift and the Curse, and it's written by Robbie Prosser, who is with us today. Autism is both a gift and a curse. I know inside what the possibilities are. I know what I have to give and what I could do. I have never had the need to hurt others. All I have is the need to give and share what makes me happy. I care far more about others than I do about myself. This has always overwhelmed me. I hate injustice and pain, whether to myself or to others. All I ever want is to stop and put it right. I have no need to cause the person pain because they have caused me pain. And what others claim is justice when it's all revenge. This is never seen because I live in a world designed and made for neurotypical people by neurotypical people. My greatest joy in life is when I can make someone else happy. The curse being autistic in a neurotypical world. What's your thoughts?
It's brilliant. It's almost like a prayer.
There's a lot of very familiar elemental feelings there. You know, you can take a few words here and there, and you can see that you've said or thought or felt them yourself. And it's a very bold and clear and sparse way of putting that down on the page. You know, there's no frilling things around. He's decided to really try and distill it out, and I appreciate that. I like that kind of poetry. It's as distilled out as it can be, and I getting to know Robbie, his voice comes through, but it comes through much more clearly in his poem than maybe if you met Robbie you would, at first glance, most people would expect from him. So in some ways, hearing that poetry and having that shared here, it's a privilege to get to know Robbie at that deeper level.
I like it for both of those reasons too. Um, so maybe the distilled for me feels minimalist because there's a lot under this. It's like the tip of an iceberg. I think it's not saying some things that it might mean to us as autistic people. It leaves them out, and it's, you know, I think you get my drift. It's the most minimalist way to say something that's so much deeper than what's here. What's here is the essence.
Yeah, and it feels to me as though what you're saying is you don't have any difficulty as another autistic person for filling in. You know, from that essence, you can grow that into a whole tree, a garden of different ideas. So that seems to me what you're saying is the real effective thing about it. You can fill in all the details.
That's the beauty of it, isn't it?
What I like about it is that it rings so true to me, and it brings out or it answers a question that I always ask of myself as an autistic person, or is it just me as a person, which is autistic anyway, of course, is about the injustice, about doing things to make things better, to help other people, and then doing that makes me feel great. I totally, I totally connect with the words there. It's, I could write a poem, similar to this, about my own experience, and even the words itself, the gift and the curse, because that's what autism does feel like at times, you know. And sometimes it's even depending who you're talking to. People say, "Oh, you've got this gift," and then some people say, "Oh, you've got this curse. You've got this horrible thing," and it's very negative language. So it's a very balanced piece, and I liked it very much.
Actually, that word curse, that really jumps out at me, and that makes me uncomfortable. I really don't like the fact that an autistic person, and we're all recognizing this as very autistic in what they're expressing, it is expressing that word curse. You know, that feels really powerfully bad to me. And the reason that the author has put that right front and center, giving it a title with curse, I don't see the balance in there. I I see a real imbalance that is being expressed. I'm not seeing enough coming back from what the author's describing as the cursed parts of it for me. You know, I'm not seeing equal opportunities and options and beauty that come from being autistic. I'm seeing the curse bit in here, and that disturbs me. But somehow he's managed to take me along in it because there's enough of the way it's expressed that chimes with me as an autistic person. So, you know, it's not just it's reaching somebody who's different to him through that bridge, but it's still changing me. And if art is changing somebody or making an expression outside somebody else's experience, then I think it's all more powerful for that.
Even from when it was first read to us, I've thought it made me think of a whole bunch of things. So one of them is this. I don't know who he's talking to, but I think maybe in a way neurotypical people. And if his greatest joy in life is when he can make someone else happy, and he also doesn't seem, I can't see it all right now. There's something about never needing to retaliate. For me, I was thinking there were times in childhood and then times even now, and I can get really worked up about a subject and I'm not articulating it right. And if I was a child, I'd be having a temper tantrum. And if I'm an adult, I'm just communicating in a a really overwhelming way that makes people upset. Well, it's because I'm upset for these autistic communication ways, but I'm not being violent. I'm maybe melting down or something. And people are not interpreting it that way, perhaps. In the peace of the moment, we know that.
What I read when it says curse is not the curse of having autism, but having autism in a world that doesn't understand what being autistic is. And as we've went through all, different conversations, and we'll keep having them because it needs to be said, is how the so-called normal of this neurotypical is that's the way things should be, and the lack of understanding towards autistic people. And I can understand that language being used for, that kind of situation, rather than saying that autism or being autistic is a curse, a disease, which many, including autistic people, believe. The next post is from Shy Little Pixie, who's a writer, just over here trying to untangle this chaotic brain of mine. Late diagnosed autistic, ADHD, and CPTSD warrior, based in Bunbury, Western Australia. And Pixie shared two photographs in relation to selective mutism and situational mutism. One picture struggling to speak, another picture says hello to strangers. Both of these photos of me were taken within a 24-hour period recently. In the photo on the left, I was struggling with an episode of selective mutism, feeling the choking sensation in my throat, unable to form sentences, and working very hard not to let my emotions spill over. In the photo on the right, I was out walking on a trail near my home, surrounded by majestic trees and sharing the space with other people I didn't know. Yet, I was able to say hello as I walked past them, sometimes saying it first, smiling at them with no tightness in my throat. I am sharing this to illustrate the fluctuating nature of selective mutism. It is often triggered by predictable scenarios, such as public speaking, but it can also be triggered without an identifiable reason. Being very shy, I have lived with this condition on and off for most of my life. I have had a wide variety of reactions in this time, from people saying I was putting it on, or just wanting attention, or I was being rude or disrespectful, or being a snob or antisocial. Selective mutism is none of these statements. It is a psychological selective mutism. Selective mutism is none of these statements. It is a physiological manifestation of anxiety which just happens to target the throat and vocal cords. I'm going to repeat this part. It is a physiological response. I want people to understand that if their child is experiencing this condition, they are not deliberately causing it. I can see how it must be confusing for outsiders to see a child appearing relaxed and able to speak, even to yell or laugh aloud in one setting, and then for this child to freeze up and be unable to speak in another setting. There is not always any rhyme or reason behind it. It just is. Personally, I am much better nowadays at knowing when I am becoming triggered, so I step away for a breather alone. Lately, though, I am having to participate in an online role plays every week as part of my course, which is activating my selective mutism and giving me awful flashbacks from my school days. Please understand, if you know someone with this condition, I promise you they are trying their best to manage it, and they are not pretending. Imagine how terrifying it feels to be unable to use your voice. How do you defend yourself or explain your feelings if you cannot speak? Sending love, Chantel. What's people's thoughts?
I'm so glad that this person posted this. I can't even tell you. I never connected those two things, the throat, but you all know that I've made choices to be mute in settings. For example, in high school, where if I was in that building, I did not speak. But also, when I was in university, and to this day, I have a feeling in my throat that feels like there's a ball in there. And in university, they actually sent me for MRIs and everything to make sure it wasn't really a ball. I don't know why there would have been a ball. Even now, the stress of this year that we're in, I'm fighting with that feeling in my throat. And so I do appreciate this. And I identified with lots of the other things she said. I never, ever knew those two things went together.
I found it very interesting. It's not something I'm affected by, but I have heard many autistic people share their stories on this. And the lack of understanding, sometimes self understanding, because of the way you're treated when these things happen. But then when you explain it or you find out that it's a physiological thing, it's it must be such a relief that there's an answer that way. Because I can imagine, what people will be accused of. And for other reasons, I've been accused of attention seeking or putting it on or doing all kind of things, relating to other things in my autism. Or just my behaviour, just doing what I do. It's like, oh, you're just doing this to get attention or make. Basically, people saying that, and it must happen in those cases with the selective mutism, or situational mutism as well as it's called, is that you're making every situation about you and you're being selfish. And you can imagine what a lot of families and even close friends can say to many people going through this sort of situation, and that lack of understanding is very hurtful.
I think we need to make sure that we're recognizing this as a psycho-physiological experience. The physiological part of it is not something that is a choice. It's something that might be managed, as the person says, by recognizing it in advance and putting themselves away from the stimulus and the triggers. It's something you have no choice about. It's physiological. But they also describe how the start of the process is in the psychological. It is in the stress, the overwhelm, the anxiety, and that because everything is joined together. In the same way that pain is a sensation in the psychological that happens in the brain, it is also a physical thing that is nerves being firing and sensing, and so everything is joined together. So what the problem is that people see things that start somewhere in the brain as something that people should get over and pull their socks up, when this emphasizes that the brain sends these situations to parts of us. And I recognize, even though I would say I'm a long way away from this person, I recognize in my youth and in my childhood very similar experiences, and I still recognize the marble in the throat. It comes back every now and again in my adult life. It's been there as something that is more in the past now, and it will come there and it will go to and fro. Yeah.
I'm interested in what you said there about overwhelm. It's almost like there isn't a cause. I mean, it's very tempting to always go looking for a root, a cause to solve the problem. Um, but maybe it's a loop of energy that you enter into in certain situations, and it that triggers. That's me basically saying that's the cause, but I don't know. I don't know where I'm going with this. It's kind of like a balance thing.
It seems to be a big problem, especially if you're living in the world that you have to. I mean, it is not voluntary in any way. But when you're a child and you're being taught to speak up or speak to the guests or, you know, stop pretending, and you're not shy on this day, but that day, but you are mute, really is a fact. Now, but you also, the way I could in high school, recognize that place is going to be a problem. And so the best approach is to go mute, which is different than when you're in a situation where suddenly you can't speak, which happened more often as a child, it sounds like, for that person and for Jules too. But it came later in life that I could tell how they were connected, but kind of not really either, because I realized so much more just by this person's post. And then I think of all the situations where, like even in workplaces, where when we were trained for media, to speak on camera and stuff, oh, everybody else could be trained so easily, but then I would have to like project my voice to the second building out of this building, and my colleagues looking at me with such compassion, like they couldn't believe the instructor was making me like really, really project my voice. And it was so painful. And I, I appreciate knowing this so much. I don't think there's a cause you could really identify, but I would say that it's, no, I don't know really, but it's a thing. Yeah, real physical, psychophysical, the way Jules described it. And I don't know what, it's good to recognize it and manage it, but when you recognize it, I don't know how. I think you maybe need to get out of the place or go be calm somehow, but you might not be able to speak.
I think what you've just described there, Teresa, is that you were. It's prophylactic, isn't it? Before you entered this space, you recognised from previous patterns that's going to be a difficult space. That might be a space which makes you clam up. That might be a space that you get noticed to be not talking suddenly if you start talking, start from a position where you're entering. So you actually decide, look, the best way is to be under the radar entirely and hack this by, you know, protecting myself by starting out that way as a choice. You know, it's your own defense.
I'm recalling the years when I used to be involved in alternative therapies, and it's spoken about there that the throat is the point of relationship because of vocalizing and other things, absorbing, swallowing. Um, and when vulnerable, it was like this overwhelm in having to relate. So the issue would be to do with that point of relationship. But you know, those were those days were a long time ago, and I just throw it in as an idea. But I'm not a great fan of that idea.
I'll tell you, I thought of that myself. So for a long time, I toyed with the idea that since it's really, really became pronounced in university and your relationships are more advanced, maybe more adult, they're getting to be more adult. Um, I started thinking maybe I needed to deal with it in therapy, but not in a practical way, not in the sort of circumventing the loop, more in this what is my issue? Why am I afraid to speak up? But I don't think that now anymore, and I'm never going to think it again. It's not a fault of my personality. It's a highly physical thing, and it has to do probably with my brain pattern, not with me relating to the world. Yes, I could deal with it in some practical way, but I'm not going to think anymore about myself that I used to even think, am I going to be lying? Is that why I'm getting the lump in my throat? Is it something bad, something pretty evil about me that I shouldn't be speaking up? You know what I mean? So I'm never going there again. I'm thinking it's something about an autistic, it's about our brain, maybe, maybe.
The next post is from Autism Together. Charity organisation, Autism Together is one of the leading providers of autism services and support in the UK. And they've shared the following. Join us for this week's coffee morning for parents and carers of autistic people at Benrick's Coffee Shop. Please feel free to pop along and speak to Amy, our advice and support officer, who will be available for any questions over a nice cuppa, which is located in 342 Woodchurch Road, Birkenhead, England. And it's Wednesday the 1st of April, 9:30 a.m. to 11 a.m. What's your thoughts?
I'm assuming that this is something that comes up often enough, because by the time you're hearing this will be past. But they have regular meetups. What do I think? I think anybody who has an interest in autism, whether that be through an autistic person that they have in their own home, them being autistic themselves, them caring for somebody or having some, whatever relationship, there should be a group where they can go and find people having similar experiences to have a chat about it. You know, what we experience by talking ourselves offline in the backstage is what they're doing there. Um, I think they should find ways of getting together and sharing and helping each other, and recognizing each other's difficulties as much as possible.
Yeah, Hampshire Autism do, they call them serendipity groups all over the New Forest. And they have a forest walk group, and I think they have a sports group, which I wouldn't take part in, but I go to some of the serendipity group they have in Lyndhurst.
I think the point of a post out like this out on Autistic Radio is to say to people, look, if you are listening, look around your area, and however it might seem a bit of a jump, a bit of a leap, please do, you know, reach out to what is available and support the things that are being set up by, you know, groups of parents or groups of autistic people or anybody related who has any kind of grouping together. Knowing they're out there and kind of getting supported by them is great, but getting involved with them is really what they need. That's how they need your support. These small groups that are all over the place, people trying things, people trying different ways of modelling to reach out that might get bigger. Put yourself behind it by leaving your house and going to one of these things.
The next post. Sorry, on you go.
I was going to say, when there was a group in Tottenham, which unfortunately doesn't meet anymore because I was the only one who ever turned up, but a woman came along with her daughter one time, and they got as far as the door, and I just popped out for a break, and I was going back in. And what I really wanted to say, but I didn't, because I didn't want to affect the situation possibly negatively. But what I wanted to say is, you've come here today, and that's good. You may not go in the room, but that's good. Another time you may want to go in the room, and another time you may want to go in the room and sit down. And then maybe in the future you'll want to go in the room and sit down and listen, and then later maybe talk. But that day they didn't want to go in the room and they left, and sadly they never came back.
I was thinking with you being the only one there, it might have been an idea to get a deck chair and go and sit outside so that no door had to be entered.
They have a garden area at Lyndhurst, which in the sun, with the room that we sit in, I mean, there's a screen, it's got the internet, so you can look at stuff on a screen, and in the summer they can open the doors and there's a big garden area.
I think that's a really clever idea, to arrange meetups for these kind of things in outside spaces, picnic areas, these kind of things, public spaces where people can, you know, walk up, not feel as though they're entering a room, entering a building, entering a new situation, that they can sidle up, observe and get there in their own steam. That's a really good, intelligent way of thinking about this, I reckon.
A lot of groups already practice this. They meet up in public situations, and many participants just observe. They don't even let people know they're there. They're just there, they're observing. and gauging it, taking the temperature, and then gradually they may get involved or recognize someone and have a kind of in. But there's also that space to release yourself from it all, to not be centered. Um, yeah, so it is positive, that kind of environment and space.
It's like a real life version of what we're doing here, having a backstage.
Yeah, the lurking idea, the observing and listening to others without feeling as though you're going to be spoken at or talked to or texted at, and then deciding at your own pace how you get in. I think that's really really important for us all in all these situations.
And with Astrid, Murder in Paris and Patience there, they also show groups of people with autism, a social group or a social skills group interacting. And I think that's important that that's seen by the general public so they understand things like that.
So I should say, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead, Teresa.
I was just going to say that I can speak a lot here now. I did just first listen to all the podcasts that I could, which is really safe because it's not even live. And then go on, I think it was Facebook while it was live. And then eventually make a comment. But when it was answered, it freaked me out. And it took me a couple more weeks to actually attend.
I was going to say briefly, I had an experience this week online where I went to one of these autistic group meetings online, Zoom, and felt that pressure at one point because I'd been putting some ideas into text regarding stimming, and it got a response from the people who were hosting, and they said they liked the idea. Did I want to speak about it? And I didn't, you know. So, but they got, to me, quite pushy about it. But that's just how it feels to me. They weren't actually being pushy. They were trying to involve me and get people to contribute because there was only a smallish group, and when they hear the same voices a lot, they kind of wonder what all these other people are doing. And if that person's put a text in or text message, then maybe they're open to communication. But I respect the space where you don't have to be vocal, and so I do have a boundary there, and it was almost breached at this moment. But the compassion in me can see, if compassion's a word, the empathy maybe, that the people who are pushing have their reasons, and they want that kind of communion, and they have their own backgrounds that inform that kind of decision making process.
I think I have experience from a long time ago, when before Autistic Radio, before Spectrum Voices, when it was a group of people who were getting together and sort of hatching the plans, and we had a Podbeam thing going on where we would broadcast live talking between ourselves, and other people would contact in and text in, and sometimes ask to be able to call in and put their voice in. And in the space, the kind of etiquette on other podcasts that was following the same idea, the live broadcasting podcasts, it was very much engage with anybody as quickly as possible, welcome them in. That's what they want to be welcomed in, they want to be shown into the party, then they want to be introduced to other people at the party, then that is the general way that everybody had, and as an expectation about the way it ran those kind of groups. And what we found was that wasn't natural to us. But when we did do that, when we picked people out and said, "Oh, you're texting in, you're saying this, that's lovely. This person's saying this, that, or the other," and they keep on saying it, and we kept saying this person's saying this, that, and the other. And then when we say to them, "Would you like to come in and say that on a voice?" That's when there's a sudden change and a sudden I've rabbit in headlights. Um, it's a very it's we can't put anybody on the spot and ask of anybody, and it's natural to us to keep making these mistakes of asking somebody, you know.
I think
It,
we do it well enough, though, because I think we recognize that even here now, for regular members who often speak, they are welcome to use the chat and will continue even to this day to read it out for them. Because just like going to a real life party, sometimes I cancel almost more often than I go to a party. I cancel at the last minute. So we don't know how we're going to feel. And that autistic radio really manages that well.
The next post is from the autistic teacher. Public figure, autistic and proud, sharing insight and understanding to help the autistic community based in the UK. And she shared a post about the famous autistic puzzle piece. It's that time of year again. Puzzle pieces creep into my newsfeed. They start to appear in the media. For years, autistic people have been saying no to the puzzle piece, but autistic voices are often left unheard. Just to mention here that not everyone dislikes the puzzle piece and it should be personal preference. However, those choosing to use it should also be aware that many autistic people find it deeply offensive. So, how did it start? It was started by the National Autistic Society in 1963, who believed at that time that people were suffering from a puzzling condition. It included the image of a weeping child. Today, we see it in more colourful ways, potentially relating to the autistic spectrum. So, for me, and I do not speak for everyone, number one, I am not a puzzle, I'm not a mystery. Number two, I am not a problem that needs to be solved. Number three, the bright colours and puzzles reinforce the myth that only children are autistic. I'm not a child. Number four, I don't have anything missing. I am not broken. In fact, that symbol doesn't represent me at all. It reinforces myths about autism that are simply not true. The majority of autistic people prefer to use the symbol for neurodiversity, or even a gold version just for autism. Autistic people are perfectly, authentically, wonderfully autistic. I will not be participating in the comments on this thread, but I will be monitoring them. As a side note, I have not mentioned Autism Speaks, as they are not well known here in the UK. Thanks. What's your thoughts?
I think charities have been around for a while really should understand that the rule of thumb in autistic circles is if you're associated in any way with the puzzle piece, you're lacking. You're less likely to be trusted and thought of as understanding the neurodiversity paradigm. You expect the prejudice against you will be that you're coming from a very old-fashioned ABA-based let's solve, let's fix the kids attitude. Why you're still using this when you know that a large group of autistic people find it offensive is telling. You don't give a fuck. You keep using this and keep justifying it despite the fact that you know that a very large number of people find it offensive. You don't care about the people that you say that you want to help and support and serve enough to respect even something as trivial as this. Shame on you.
I like how the puzzle symbol has become itself a symbol for people who don't like the puzzle symbol. It's like it's a kind of token of evil, like a picture of Satan. And yet, isn't it all just branding? I suppose if it's associated, as Jules was saying and has been mentioned in the text, it's associated with prior thoughts and philosophy from a bad perspective, from bad actors, then of course it should be used as that kind of negative symbol. Or ignored totally, but that would be impossible. But we're in the realm of branding, aren't we?
Yes, I think so. I think it is like branding. Those things are done by committees. No one even who decides that's the one knows what it means either. And since it was first developed in 1963, that's when I was conceived, or I was in gestation. I imagine about that puzzle piece that it clicks into surrounding disorders. Like in 1963, they thought there was something adjacent to schizophrenia. So in my mind, I see it clicking in there. Or I just only have negative feelings, but I'm quite adept at avoiding it. I I I don't even know what I think about the new logo. You know, I know they don't say it's a logo, but it feels like a logo.
I think the problem is the attitudes for the people that actually use it and how they correspond to people who say and feel that is offensive. It's like we know best scenario, or it's like this justification. It's like you're not. It's like they think you're unwell anyway, so they're not going to listen to. Or there's people actually saying that the people that are being identified as autistic and know they're autistic are not autistic according to some researchers now because it doesn't suit their narrative. So it's all about logos, all about narratives. It's all about, I think Jules, and not just Jules, but everyone said it, is about the power thing. We are in charge. You are in this kind of box where we are putting you, and we are going to make the decisions based on what we think is best for you. But it's very true. I mean, these sort of posts come out every year. You know, it's come up to April. That's Autism Month. I think it's Autism Blue. And people put this kind of thing on their kind of Facebook profiles, whatever, saying that I know someone with autism, or, you know, an autistic child, and autistic parent, you know, stuff like that. But basically, as Raymond's saying, it's about the branding. It's like it's something that's been used for years, and sometimes probably just being used, just ignorantly. It's not out of bad intention, it's just ignorance. But that in itself is very harmful.
Yes, virtue signaling is dangerous.
Harry, what about that thing about people who were diagnosed with Asperger's who want to hold on to the idea of Asperger's as some kind of symbolic meaning for themselves, their way of understanding the world? And I can see that older definitions may still have some validity for some people. Maybe ignorance, they may not have read into why they're so hurtful, but it may be that it validates them in some sense.
That term Asperger's syndrome, what I was diagnosed with, I can remember trying to research what it actually meant. Because it said syndrome, and they're saying it's Asperger's syndrome, you've got autism, but you've not. You've got, I know, but you've got autism that isn't that bad. So people can't really identify with it unless they look closely at you in terms of your behaviour, in terms of your obsessions, your weird hobbies, or your weak. It's all about the negative language. So like, oh, you need to be in routine and all sorts of stuff. And I'm glad that that terminology is no longer, well, I'm not saying it's not official anymore. So I'm actually thinking, I'm not kind of, I don't want you to own that, but just to ask the group actually. It depends how what people were, identified or diagnosed. I mean, I was diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome, so what would I just be now? Just autistic, or even just be me?
I think using that manual, there are levels, and so I think maybe it's level one. But I honestly, I don't spend a lot of time in this thinking about this, but because all the levels need different types or maybe different amounts of something, uh, it's not compensation, like, you know what I mean. They need differing levels of help, and I only have a negative feeling about Asperger's because somebody was really mean to me, an adult, like within the past few years, 5 years, in a terrible way, you know. So I try to stay away from the symbols and the labels and just try to be figuring myself out just on my own with you guys.
I have a friend who refers to himself as an Aspie and his traits and character things as Aspie. He's quite into it. Um, and I was just sort of suggesting that I think there are some people out there who like that identity.
Yeah, there certainly are. There's a whole community around the word Aspie rather than Asperger's. And then there's this political debate about the association with the original person who did the experiments to define intelligent autism, which is really what Asperger's is. I was diagnosed in Scotland, and the uh, the kind of the final phrases were that we would have in the past diagnosed you as Asperger's syndrome, but now we define it all as autistic spectrum disorder, which you already know, Mr. Barton, because you have described it all to me, probably. So, yeah, there is no Asperger's being given out now, but they still make associations with it because some people feel that if they're part of the Asperger's group, then other people will understand them as intelligent, and they might attach onto it some of the stereotypes that go with it. somebody who knows things, specialist, maybe part of law or part of things. So people have societal hooks that they can hang on Asperger's that they want to cling on to, and leave it to them, let them have it. They need everything they can to boost their own way in a world that's worked against them, because they are autistic just like us.
I loved that part of my diagnosis that said presenting with, you know, ASD, but not presenting with any sign of ADHD.
My official diagnosis was Asperger's, but it was actually a time after it was removed from the diagnostic manual. I don't like it because of the fact that it was named after someone who decided whether someone was worthy of being allowed to live or not. And I don't find that this idea of levels helpful because it's going back to the idea of autism being linear, which it's not. And I struggle as much as anyone if the right support isn't there. And we should really be looking at the individual support an autistic person wants rather than trying to classify them. One autistic person needs more help than another. It's actually different autistic people need different help.
I agree. I think that's very valuable. I feel like when you're level one, uh, I don't think there's any support yet in Canada, and that people can get away with virtue signaling and just saying, let me know if you need any accommodations, but that's it. After that, you'll never get one. Like that'll be like at work or something. And I agree with you, Robbie, about the association, but they don't mention it in the diagnosis now because I was only diagnosed, I feel like almost 2 years ago. Um, so it didn't come up at all. Uh, but I realized that it didn't exist. But then I wondered if I know for a lot of people that's their identity and it's a positive identity, and so they want to stick with it. But I wonder if level one or Asperger's is harmful because, as Robbie said, if you're not getting support that you need, really big things can go wrong. And if you present as really intelligent or an expert in a field, somebody mentioned, say, law, people don't expect you to need any support, but you might be very bad at some aspects of your life that cause great harm to your future. So you do need help. If you want it, it should be there.
I'll tell you what, Teresa, you're level 2 now then. That's each year since diagnostic realization is a level, I reckon. So you're in that 2 year period, which I'm guessing for you recognise as very different from the first few months and certainly from the first year. I think you probably get what I'm saying.
Yeah, I do. I it took me a year even just to wrap my mind around it being like being applied to me. Uh like I could, it was a concept. I was aware of it, but I was maybe almost like in shock. But I embraced it, but I didn't feel like I deserved it. All kinds of weird things, but I do feel better now.
Was it something like testing the concept?
No, I believed it as soon as I heard it, but honestly, even when they were reading my diagnosis to me in person, she said, we don't have much, but we have a group. It's for autistic people. And then I said, so I can't go? So I'm like 60 years old. I am smart, but I'm not getting things. Do you see what I mean? Like I didn't hear what she was saying to me. Um, I felt like I had lived a life with the wrong operating manual. That's how it felt.
I've actually got my diagnosis to hand, and it says assessed using the DSM-V criteria for autism spectrum disorder that does not include the previous subcategories such as autism or Asperger's syndrome. And I've got a diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder 299.0 as defined in the newly updated DSM-V, which would equate to an ICD-10 diagnosis of childhood autism.
Oh, they did tell me I've had it sent for my whole life, which I think is a useful thing to say. Because I do know I was more autistic when I was young and then highly masked. But I don't know that from them. I know that from probably being here. I know it's true about myself. I'm discerning enough to figure it out.
That brings up that old hoary question of, can it be acquired?
No? Except for maybe something in the womb or
So it will always be childhood autism then?
Waygate, no, we can't allow that to go out unchallenged. You cannot acquire autism within the womb. Autism has a very highly genetic component, and there are other factors that might make those genes be expressed, but it's not something that anybody can acquire in the womb.
oh, that's a good point. I think I might have been confused because in my diagnosis, they kept asking about the gestation period and if I had ever fallen and hit my head. So I'm not sure why they were asking that in this present day, except for you've just described it very well. Maybe that's what they were looking for, like an expression of a genetic predisposition.
Acquired can also mean triggered. My friend believed his mother had a fall when she was carrying him, and she did in the supermarket. But we can tie a lot of threads together.
Those things could be a fluke too. They could be totally unrelated.
I'm sorry, but we've run out of time. Thanks, everyone. It was a good discussion tonight. And a lot of good stuff discussed, and of course, we're running out of time. So, this is Harry's Facebook for Sunday, the 29th of March 2026, which is part of the Spectrum Voices Conversation, which is live every Sunday, 5:55 p.m. to 7 p.m. UK time. So I look forward to next week, and thanks again.
Edit point. Harry, can you absolutely double check every statement from the last little few minutes to ensure that there's no signals of things that might be misunderstood? We have to be extremely careful on that.